Hi GCO, it's time for our end of the day story. We are now on chapter 6 of our book. This one is called Meanwhile Deep in the Ocean. Hopefully you're sitting comfortably. Just going to get comfy myself and then we'll start. Meanwhile, deep in the ocean, but not so very far from the Isle of Burke, a real sea dragon, such as old Wrinkly had been describing, lay sleeping on the seabed. He was indescribably large. He'd been there so long that he'd almost seemed to be part of the ocean floor itself. A great underwater mountain covered in shells and barnacles, some of his limbs half buried in the sand, he was so big. Generation after generation of little hermit crabs had born and died in this dragon's ears. Hundreds and hundreds of years he'd slept because he'd had rather a large meal. Oh my goodness, he must be incredibly huge. He had had the luck to catch a Roman legion camping on top of a cliff top. They were completely cut off and he'd spent an enjoyable afternoon wolfing down the whole lot of them, from commanding officer to the lowliest private. Horses, chariots, shield and spears, the entire lot went down the ravenous reptilian gullet. God, that's a good description, isn't it? And while things such as golden chariot wheels are an additional source of fibre to a dragon's diet, they do take some time for him to digest. The dragon had crawled down into the depths of the ocean and gone into a sleep coma. Dragons can stay in this suspended state for eternity, half alive, half dead, buried under fathom after fathom of icy cold seawater. Not one muscle of this particular dragon had moved for 6 or 7 centuries. Now, if you remember when we did the Romans, you'll remember how long a century actually is. So that's a really long time. But the previous week, a killer whale who had chased some seals unexpectedly deep was surprised to notice a slight movement in the upper eyelid of the dragon's right eye. An ancestral memory stirred in the whale's brain, and he swam away from there as fast as his fins would carry him. A week later, the sea around Dragon Mountain, which had previously been teeming with crabs, lobsters, and shoals of enormous fish, was a great underwater desert. Not a mollusk stirred, not a scallop shimmered. The only sign of life for miles and miles was the rapid jerking of both the dragon's eyelids, fluttering up and down as if it had suddenly gone into a lighter sleep and was dreaming. Who knows what dark dreams? Chapter 7. Toothless wakes up. Toothless woke up about 3 weeks later. Fishlegs and Hiccup were at Hiccup's house. Everybody else was out, so Hiccup decided to take the opportunity to check on Toothless's basket. He pulled it out from under the bed, and as he did, a thin plume of bluey-grey smoke was drifting out from under the lid. Fishlegs whistled. "He's awake all right," said Fishlegs. "Here we go." Hiccup opened the basket. The smoke billowed out and made Hiccup and Fishlegs cough. Hiccup fanned it away. Once his eyes had stopped watering, he could make out a very small, ordinary dragon looking up at him with enormous, innocent-looking, glass-green eyes. "Hello, Toothless," said Hiccup, in what he hoped was a good accent in Dragonese. "What are you doing?" asked Fishlegs curiously. Dragonese as a language is punctuated by shrill shrieks and popping noises and sounds most extraordinary when spoken by a human voice. Now, I'm going to read through these instructions for you because some of you told me what you thought Dragonese would be like after the last question I asked you. So here it is, learning to speak Dragonese. You see that there? In order to train your dragon without using the traditional methods of yelling at it, You must first learn to speak Dragonese. Dragons are the only other creatures who speak a language as complicated and as sophisticated as humans. Now, I am not going to speak Dragonese, but I'm going to tell you some of these phrases in English. No pooing inside the house, please. My mother does not like to be bitten on the bottom. Please, would you be so kind as to spit my friend out? Now that gives you some ideas of what dragons get up to. I was just talking to it, said Hiccup, very embarrassed. Just talking to it, said Fishlegs. What do you mean you're talking to it? You can't talk to it, it's an animal. Oh, shut up, Fishlegs, said Hiccup. You're frightening it. Toothless huffed and puffed and blew out some smoke rings. He inflated his neck to make himself look bigger. That meant he was scared, or possibly angry. Eventually he got the courage to unfurl his wings and flapped up onto Hiccup's arm. He walked his way up to Hiccup's shoulder and Hiccup turned his face towards him. Toothless pressed his forehead onto Hiccup's forehead and gazed deeply and solemnly into Hiccup's eyes. Hiccup was just thinking, this is amazing. I'm really making contact here. When Toothless bent down and bit him on the arm. Hiccup let out a yelp and threw him off. Hissed Toothless, hovering in the air in front of Hiccup. Want fish now? I haven't got any fish, said Hiccup in Dragonese, rubbing his arm. Luckily for him, Toothless didn't have any teeth, but he had powerful jaws, so it's still incredibly painful. Toothless bit him on the other arm. Are you okay? Said Fishlegs. I can't believe I'm asking this, but what is he saying to you? He wants something to eat, replied Hiccup, grimly rubbing both arms. He tried to make his voice sound firm but pleasant to dominate the creature. But we have no fish. Okay then. Eat, said Toothless. He made a lunge for Fiddlesticks, who shrieked up the nearest wall with a yowl of terror. Hiccup just managed to grab Toothless's tail as he flew off. The dragon struggled, still shouting about needing fish, and Hiccup still saying he didn't have any fish. And also, as he said, you can't eat the cat. I like him. Fiddlesticks, meanwhile, had escaped to a beam high up in the roof. They decided to put Toothless in Stoick's bedroom, where there was a mouse problem. For a while he was happy swooping after the desperately squeaking mice, but then he got bored and started eating the mattress. Ah! Said Stoick the Vast, who happened to enter his room at the very moment Toothless was gobbling down his mattress. Toothless launched himself at his vast beard, which he'd mistaken for a chicken. Get him off, said Stoick. He doesn't do what I say, said Hiccup. Yell very loudly at him, Stoick shouted. Very loudly! Hiccup yelled as loudly as he could, which wasn't very loud. He didn't do yelling. Please, will you stop eating my father's beard? As Hiccup had suspected, Toothless took absolutely no notice whatever. Drop to the floor, you horrible little reptile, yelled Stoick. Toothless dropped straight to the floor. You see, said Stoick, that's how you deal with dragons. Stoick's hunting dragons entered the room. Toothless stood still as they paced around him, their yellow eyes glinting evilly. Each was about the size of a leopard, and they were as delighted at his arrival as a couple of giant cats might be of a cute little kitten arriving into their kitchen. Now, that's where I'm going to leave it for today, but we'll finish off the rest of this chapter tomorrow. What would you predict is going to happen next in this story? Are Newt's Breath and Hook Fang going to eat Toothless, or is something else going to happen?